Hi everybody, and thanks for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial of the Holy Grail. Well, if you're anything like me, you're probably always searching for new fly tying patterns, and hopefully those patterns will also catch a few fish. Well, some easy things to do are basically talk to your friends, go on some of those fly tying and fly fishing forums, and then also check out current websites. And the website that I was checking out recently was the Orvis website. They always have a lot of really great and innovative fly tying patterns on there, though some of them require you to do a little extra research. Well, sure enough, I came across this fly, this beadhead nymph called the Holy Grail. It's a really cool looking fly, and when I just looked over the initial pictures, I was impressed. For starters, there's really just very basic, simple materials that just make this a really simple fly to tie. Whenever I looked over it, I thought, geez, I've tied patterns really similar to this, but not this exact one. So it's really interesting to me that you could take all these really basic materials, put them together, and create a fly that I've never fished before. The second thing that kind of drew me to this Holy Grail fly whenever I first saw it was the fact that Orvis allows reviews on their websites, and this fly had some really decent reviews about it. Now, I don't really know whether or not I should believe all the reviews on websites, especially those attempting to make money, but this fly got some really good reviews, and when I looked at it, I originally thought this would be a great fly for a dry dropper opportunity. And sure enough, a couple of the reviewers had mentioned the fact that they'd fished this and done really well in those dry dropper situations. So for those of you thinking about fishing this fly under a dry fly, definitely go for it. Attach approximately a foot to maybe 18 inches of tippet from your dry fly to this nymph and go crazy with it. The third thing that I really liked about the Holy Grail was, after seeing it on the Orvis site, I did just a quick internet search of this pattern and really couldn't find too many other pieces of information about it. So that allows kind of our own artistic creativity into this pattern, because I didn't have a listing of all the materials that are used. So I was able to substitute some that I thought would make it just a more effective fly without ruining or without really tampering with the integrity of the original pattern. So whenever I go through these materials today, I'll be going through the materials that I believe would be the most effective for this pattern, though they may vary slightly from the original one that Orvis is selling through its website. Well, the other piece that I'd really like to make mention of is the fact that when I first saw this fly, it really just jumped out, because it could be one of those patterns that you could quickly substitute into either a mayfly or a caddis. Whenever I first saw it, I noticed that there were three colors: black, hare's ear, and olive. I'll be tying the olive today, but whenever I first saw those three colors, I quickly realized that take those three colors, look at a fly without a tail, and more than likely this fly is intended to represent a caddis. However, when you look at the materials that they're using and you kind of see everything going on with this pattern, it can easily be adapted into a mayfly emerger by simply adding a tail, such as some Coq de Leon, some mallard flank, or even making into that emerger with some Zelon or some type of antron material as a trailing shuck. So this is a fly that you can easily just substitute as either a mayfly or a caddis fly. In fact, my recommendation is, if you're going to be searching as kind of that green olive, that green caddis fly, or that bluing olive mayfly, maybe tie it with a tail, and then if you notice there's a lot of caddis on the water that are in that olive color, you can quickly just snip that tail off and fish it as a caddis instead of a mayfly. So this is a really neat fly that you can vary as well. Well, with all that said, let me get to the actual tying of this fly, the Orvis Holy Grail. I'm going to first show you a picture of the finished fly, list all the materials, then I'll go into the actual tying procedures for this pattern. Alright, let's get started tying this Holy Grail fly. For starters, in my Stonfo Cayman Vise, I have an Allen fly fishing hook. This is their N204BL. That's their shrimp and caddis pupa hook. It's got a nice bend to it, a little offset. The BL stands for barbless, which is a really nice thing because it allows me to slide the tungsten bead over, which I have a 2mm tungsten bead on this right now. I'll tie this pattern anywhere between sizes 12 the whole way down to a size 20, depending on the natural caddis fly or mayfly that I'm attempting to represent. For my thread today, I'm going to be using some Unithread. This is their olive in an 8/0. I'm just going to attach this thread somewhere around that front to mid section. Then I'm going to stick with the Uni products, and I'm going to jump to this material called Umum Mylar. This is the size 1/32. That's in inches. Basically, it's called the size 14. This is the smaller of the two sizes. And this is some really neat holographic tinsel. I recommend you checking this stuff out. A lot of the times I'll use more of a clear to let the body shine through, but in this case, this chartreuse really just adds a lot to this pattern. Just gotta cut a little section away, tie it on. When I tie it on, I'm actually going to really just make sure that my thread's covering it completely. Then I'm gonna wrap back, and you're gonna continue wrapping down the bend until you almost get to a point where it's borderline uncomfortable. Just keep wrapping. Go the whole way down, and then stop. So you'll notice I really went pretty far down the bend of that hook, and that's exactly what you want this pattern looking like. Next, for my dubbing, I'm going to add some SLF Squirrel. This is their spiky dubbing. The color is olive. It's got a little bit of shine to it, and it really just makes this pattern look really nice. I'm going to attempt to taper this pattern, so I'm going to just place a little bit of dubbing on it first, and then add more. Just build it up just a little bit more as I get closer towards the thorax. But it does feel like I add a lot of dubbing to this fly, so if you feel like you're doing the same, then you probably are doing it correctly. Okay, once you have a healthy amount of dubbing there, I have dubbing that's approximately maybe 3 inches down my thread. I'm just going to start wrapping. And again, I'm really going to keep in consideration of that tapering. I want it relatively slender coming up around. Then once I get to the point where the barb would be, I'm just going to add a little bit more and more, go over itself, and just thicken it up until approximately the halfway point. So once I get there, I'm just going to remove the excess dubbing. I don't need all that extra stuff. I'm just going to get it off my thread as best as possible. Just get that a little bit more in there. I'm going to leave my my thread hang. What I want to just do right now is just quickly show you that I can bring my bead up, and I have approximately 1.5 beads to 2 beads in front of it if I push it the whole way against that that body right now. And that's approximately where you want it. You want to leave a nice little gap still in the front, because that bead is going to be, we're going to have a couple other things going on, as you'll notice here. Next, I'm going to take this holographic tinsel and just wrap it. I'm looking to get anywhere between 2 to 3 turns of this tinsel, depending on the size of the fly that I'm fishing. Once I get that, I can just tie it off. I only need a couple turns to lock that in place. Okay, again, everything's looking good. I'm just going to take my bead and kind of slam everything back just a hair. All right, next I'm going to wrap back basically to that last tinsel wrap, and it's right there that I'm going to add my wing pad or my wing case. For that, you want something dark. You can go with turkey. In this case, I'm going to use pheasant tail. I really just love using pheasant tail as that wing case. And whenever I grab my fibers, I'm going to get approximately 8. So I'm going to get a nice little pinch of these pheasant tail fibers. If you have some that's all shot up, that would probably be even better to use. So you can see my tips right there. It really doesn't matter if they're lined up or not, because I'm going to be snipping those away. I don't want to use that thin part of the fiber. I'm going to snip that away, and I'm going to be using a much thicker part of these pheasant tail fibers. So I'm going to tie them in with the tip section that I snipped. That's the part that's going to get tied in. I'm going to lock those in place. I'm just going to wrap back. I've got a nice spot there for a thorax now. I'm going to return to my dubbing. Just add approximately 1 inch of dubbing. I'm only going to make a few turns of that. Then what I'm going to do now is pull my bead up and then place some wraps in front of the bead. So I'm just going to pull the bead back towards that thorax, and I really have to push it with my fingernail to just make sure it's back against everything. I'm going to wrap in front of it. I don't want to put too many wraps here because I don't want to build it up. Alright, at this point, now I'm going to add in my soft hackle. I've just grabbed a nice Hungarian partridge feather. To prep this, and the side of the feather that you're looking at is the outside. So if this was on the bird still, this would be the outside. I'm actually going to turn that towards me. grab it by the tips, and first thing I'm going to do is remove all this fluff at the bottom. All that marabou stuff is great, but not for my pattern. Then the next thing I'm going to do is, again, I'm looking at the front of the bird now, or the front of the feather. I'm going to remove half of the feather, half of those fibers from the stems. So now I'm showing you the front. That's what it looks like. To finalize the prep, I'm holding it by the tips. I'm going to stroke the fibers down so it looks like this. Let me grab my little needle here, and it's at this point right here where I'm pointing with this needle. That's my tie-in location on this feather. So I want to tie in right there, and then I'm going to be grabbing it with a pair of hackle pliers by the stem. So I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want a lot of fibers interfering with this fly. Second of all, I don't want a thick stem. If I would tie it in down here, it's a much thicker part of the stem. So I want to use this thin part of the stem. I want to use as much as possible, and I'm only going to make a couple turns anyway. Now, for a beginning tyer, this was definitely the most technical part of this pattern because it's a little difficult to get everything in here. I'm going to transfer this feather over to my left hand. I'm going to have that front tip section of the feather facing forward. It's very difficult to do that pinch method here because of the bead. So I'm just going to go up, and I'm going to try to pull back, lock the thread in between my fingers, and come back around, and then lock those fibers in place. After I've done that once, I can just wrap a few times forward, and that's it. I have my feather locked in. I'm going to take a very sharp pair of scissors. I'm going to try to trim these as close to the hook as possible. Okay, next I'm going to grab a pair of hackle pliers. This is my Stonfo set of hackle pliers. I really recommend these. These are called the Stonfo Elite. What you can do is just simply grab onto the stem, and I'm just going to make approximately 1.5 to 2 turns. After I come up with that second turn, I'm just going to wrap it in place. Lock it with approximately 2 turns. Then I'm going to unclip. At that point, I'm actually going to take all the fibers, stroke them all back, including the stem, and then place another wrap in front. Now I'm going to pull my stem back forward. I'm going to cut it out of there. I don't need that in there. Okay. All right, the final part before we finish tying this fly off is to basically just make sure we have a number of fibers on both sides, kind of evenly distributed. Then I'm going to bring this wing case, these pheasant fibers forward. I'm going to lock those in place. So I'm just going to hold them forward. I'm going to place a couple of locking wraps. Once I'm sure they're locked in, then I'm just going to place a couple wraps in front. I'm going to put a half hitch, and I really prefer a half hitch right there, just to make sure that everything's in place, and because I don't want that thread to slide down as I'm attempting to trim these fibers. Okay, once they're trimmed, I have a nice dark head. Now I'm just going to finish that head. I'm going to add a little bit more thread to it to get that nice olive color. Get 1/2 hitch in there. Let me get a couple of whip finishes. And there is my finished Holy Grail nymph. Now what's nice about this pattern is, as I show you it and I give you that nice 360, I'll first show you the top. That wing case, that wing pad really just came out very nice. Having that dark color in there was a really smart idea for the person that created this version of the fly, because it really can show you a couple different things, such as in the case of a mayfly, it might be nice and dark because those wings are starting to emerge. So keep that in mind, that having a real nice wing pad in there can just do lots for this pattern. Next, as I continue around, you can really see how that bead is just, it's down there, it helps to build up a thorax, and it gives it a little bit of shine in there. That could represent that shine that you'll see in a caddis as it's also emerging. And then finally, as you kind of glance back towards the body, you can see that Umum Mylar, that holographic chartreuse color, really just giving it a lot of nice coloration. You can see it, that light just bouncing off of it. And then obviously my favorite part is going to be the soft hackle. I think the soft hackle, it's not overwhelming. I don't have a lot of hackle on it. If you actually take a look at the Orvis site of their pictures of the Holy Grail, they definitely have a lot more hackle than mine. I don't recommend that. I don't encourage that. It's definitely personal preference and just my opinion, though I really will suggest to all of you to just kind of go a little bit easy on the hackle. In fact, I've created a Hungarian partridge fly tying tutorial, and I'll put a link for that up right now to kind of give you some of my own thoughts in regards to adding the soft hackle. So with all that said, this is a great pattern of fish, either as an emerger or as a nymph, a little bit closer to the bottom of the water column. If you really are into that dry dropper, I would encourage you to fish it below a dry fly, approximately 12 to 20 inches, somewhere in that range, whatever you feel comfortable with. I really do appreciate you viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial. For starters, I'd like to thank Allen Fly Fishing for the use of their N204BL shrimp and caddis pupa hook. You can check those out at allenflyfishing.com. I'd also like to thank the Unithread company for the use of their Umum Mylar in the holographic chartreuse color. You can check out their website at the following link. And then finally, if you have not had a chance to check out this Stonfo Cayman Vise, I really encourage you to look into it. You know that I really love this Stonfo Elite Hackle Plier. I really just am just giddy over this thing, as I have been for quite some time. But I have recently received this Stonfo Cayman Vise, and I encourage you to check out some of their products as well. So thanks again to all of you for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them directly on this YouTube page, or as always, you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thanks everyone for viewing this fly tying tutorial of the Holy Grail Nymph.